Hello, chess fans. In today's video I am going to share 3 games where I played the Benko Gambit. Game 1 starts with d4. Knight to f6. c4. c5. d5. b5. e3. e6. d takes e6. f takes e6. c takes b5. a6. b takes a6. I take the pawn with my bishop. My opponent develops their knight to e2. I then move my bishop to e7. g3. I move my bishop to b7, targeting the rook. My opponent shifts the rook to g1. I then advance my bishop to f3. My opponent develops their knight from b to c3. Short castle. Queen to d3. Knight to a6. Knight to f4. I jump my knight to b4, attacking the queen. The queen retreats to d2. I then bring my other knight to e4, putting pressure on the queen. We exchange knights. Knight to d3. I take the pawn on a2 with my rook. We then exchange rooks. b3. c4. We trade knights. Bishop to d2. I move my queen to b6, clearing the path for my rook to go to a8. Queen to b2. Bishop to b4. We exchange bishops. My opponent moves their queen to d2, proposing a queen trade. I capture the pawn on b3 with my queen. Bishop to g2. In this position, I missed force checkmate. Can you find it? It's queen to b1, delivering check. My opponent can block with their queen, but I push the pawn to d2, giving another check. The king captures the pawn. I move my queen to b2, checking again. The king then moves to e1. Finally, my queen takes the pawn on f2, delivering checkmate. Back to the game. I slide my rook to a8. f3. I move my rook to a1, delivering check. The king moves to f2. I then shift my rook to a2. My opponent takes the rook. I capture their queen, delivering check. The king moves to f1. Finally, I move my queen to e2, delivering checkmate. Game 2 starts with d4. Knight to f6. c4, c5, d5, b5, b3. We trade pawns. e6. D takes e6. F takes e6. Knight to c3. d6. My opponent develops their bishop to g5, pinning my knight. I move my bishop to e7 to unpin it. e3. Short castle. My opponent develops their other bishop to d3. I respond by moving my knight to c6. Knight g to e2. Bishop to b7. Short castle. I advance my knight to e5. Queen to c2. I capture the bishop. My opponent takes my knight in return. I move my other knight to g4. We exchange bishops. My opponent jumps the knight to b5. In this position, I missed a tactic. Can you find it? Its queen slides to h4, threatening checkmate on h2. My opponent can block with h3. I respond by moving my knight to f2, attacking the queen. If white wants to save the queen, can you find forced checkmate? Its knight takes h3, delivering check. White can capture the knight. Black then moves the queen to g5, giving another check. The king moves to h2. Black plays queen to g2, delivering checkmate. Back to the game. I slide my queen to g5. My opponent captures on d6. I then move my knight to e5, attacking the queen and threatening checkmate. My opponent captures the bishop. I take the queen. We rearrange our pieces. We exchange pawns. I push my a pawn. Push my a pawn. I promote to a second queen. I deliver checkmate. Game 3 starts with d4. Knight to f6. c4, c5. D takes c5, e5, b4, a5, b takes a5. I develop my bishop to c5. My opponent responds by placing their bishop on d2. I then advance my knight to e4. My opponent counters by moving their knight to f3. In this position, can you find the best move for black? I capture the pawn on f2 with my bishop, delivering checkmate. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell so you can stay updated with all our latest content.